Hello, everyone, and welcome to my talk entitled A Vulnerable Tale About Burnout. My name is JuliaSimon. I'd like to firstly thank Women Tech Makers for having me participate in this conference. It's a huge honor. I'm usually the one in my line of work dealing with organizing the conference and picking the talks. So the fact that I'm presenting, it's a first for me, and it's a really special moment for me to be telling the story of what I've lived through over the past few years. So this burnout occurred in 2019, and I'll tell you a little bit about the contributing factors, what happened, how I was able to get out of it, and where I'm at now. So a little bit about myself. I am a Montrealer, an Anglo-Montrealer. I also speak a few other languages, including French, Spanish, German, and I've lived around the world in various locations at various times. I'm also a very proud mother of a 10-year-old boy, and I work at a company called CloudOps. I've been there for 6 years, and I was the first official woman to be hired all those years ago, and I proudly say that we're 19 women as of this week. So it's really wonderful to be able to see the growth there. I'm in the people and culture team, and I'm responsible for building, maintaining, contributing to communities around cloud computing. So that's DevOps communities as well as the Cloud Native Computing Foundation communities. So I'm very honored to be part of that group. I'm also an animal lover, and I have a cat named Flash. And I really enjoy being on my bike, both in the winter and in the summer. It's really my solo time, my place to think and to reflect, and it's really something I love doing. I do want to stress that I am not a mental health professional. The experiences that I talk about are purely my own and personal. They're not medical advice. I just wanted to add that as a caveat because I think it's important. So, the theme of the conference today is Courage to Create. I couldn't have picked a better theme for my talk. And I think for people and women in general, I think we all need a little courage. The goal of my talk today is to really share my experience, to show where courage was required, and how I was really able to create a different path for myself and a different future based on an experience of, kind of taking lemons and making lemonade. I also want to destigmatize mental health, both in the workplace as well as specifically in tech. I think it's something that a lot of people are still really unaware of, and there's not a lot of understanding around what it is, how it can affect people. So that's something that I'd really like to try to normalize a little bit more. I think people are really afraid it will affect their careers, and I'm here to say otherwise. So just to start, a quick recap of what burnout is. So it's actually been recognized by the World Health Organization as a professional phenomenon. There is stress in our lives. We always have moments of stress that are pointed, and burnout really is this prolonged stress. So even if we're doing quote unquote self-care and we're taking baths and we're doing all the things, there's still like an underlying layer of stress. So that's basically what burnout is. It's either physical or emotional, in my case, also existential. And so it's this really sort of underlying, not going anywhere, chronic fatigue. It creates negativity, cynicism, apathy, frustration, just a general annoyance with the world, wanting to disconnect with the world. In my case, it was a depression. So it's a burnout, but it took a long time to kind of get to that stage, and there were underlying symptoms of depression that I ignored for a long time. Eventually, I also wasn't able to sleep properly. It did, in terms of my professional life, it really made me feel like I was incompetent and that what I was contributing wasn't really adding value. So those are really some of the places of how it affected me. Also, our perception with work and feeling like we're contributing in a valuable way there. So the context for women. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background around, and there's no secret around how women are raised or have been raised, and hopefully these are things that will change for the next generations. But the brunt of domestic work is on women. The brunt of child rearing and, you know, children, parental obligations is on women. So we're kind of already starting at a bit of a disadvantage because we already have a full-time job. We already have two full-time jobs. So it's already, you know, kind of bringing us to a point where, you know, if we were starting at a more level playing field, maybe things would be different. But a lot of those chores and those responsibilities fall on women. And then not just we're not just expected to, you know, do all those things, but then we also have to perform at work and compete at work and advance at work. So we're really expected to do all the things and doing them all well, which is a lot of pressure. There's also a very noticeable and notable gap in recognition and pay. So recognition meaning that women's efforts and contributions are noticed, acknowledged, and allow for advancements because of the work that they're doing. Pay, I think, goes without saying that there needs to be some form of formal pay equity there. And then in terms of competition, I think my generation at least was raised to be in the workplace as if a man would be in the workplace. We are supposed to negotiate, we're supposed to compete, we're supposed to move up, we're supposed to do all of these things that are the way the men do it. And so I think that there's a lot of value in that because I've learned a lot from that. And also maybe there's a recognition that needs to happen that we're all different and we all have different needs and we all have different ways of working and approaching these topics. In addition to this kind of bulk of societal norms, you know, my burnout didn't just happen because of personal issues or because of work issues. You know, there's also an element of programming, of who we are and how we're socialized to be in the world. And for me, this was a very developed over sense of responsibility. I want to make sure things are done well. I want to get a lot of things done. I'm very productive. My self-worth and self-value is very much tied to the number of things I can check off a list and how well I'm doing it. Perfectionism as well. I'm also quite hard on myself. I was actually just came across an old report card of mine from grade 2 where the teacher actually wrote that I'm able to do all the things well and that I'm actually quite hard on myself. So I thought that was quite telling that at age 7 or 8, there was already evidence of the way I would be as a woman. So these were a lot of things that I had to deconstruct and kind of really evaluate and look at throughout this burnout experience. So there are many triggers for me. As I mentioned, it's not just a work thing or just a personal thing. It was really kind of layers of an onion and different a series of events that occurred over several years. So starting with a separation, a difficult separation from my son's father, which led me then to be a single parent, and then going back to work. And I was going back to an industry, or I was going back to work in a completely new industry, technology that I knew absolutely nothing about. So I really wanted to make sure that I was learning and that I was effective and that I could do my job properly. And eventually, as the company grew, I was the solo marketer there. So I started at CloudOps in marketing, and we wanted to do different things, and the potential of projects and things that we could do was infinite. So that eventually started to overwhelm me, and eventually the team started to grow. And then I also had an experience of grief. So my beloved dog of 13 years died a few years ago, and that was something that I was not prepared for. I was prepared for her death, but I was not prepared for the experience of grief. It's something that hit me really hard. It was the first time that I had experienced losing a being that was so close to me, and that really kind of exacerbated all the things that I was already feeling. It exacerbated that and just kind of made it worse, and made life seem a lot darker and a lot more challenging. And then again, sort of on the personal side, so those were like the environmental factors. And then on the personal side, it was really again, who I was and how I was interacting with the world. So I really wanted people to think that I was valuable and think that my work was good. I had an overdeveloped sense of obligation as well, where whenever anyone asked me for anything, work or personal, I felt the immediate desire and need to say yes, and to say yes for everything. So I would take many things on happily, but then realize, oh God, there's so much happening here and I can't do all this, and I can do it and I should do it. So I'm just going to plow through even if I'm exhausted and I'm unhappy. I also really wanted to make sure that that others thought that I was, doing a good job, and that I was a valued and efficient member of the team or the family, or whatever it was. So these were a lot of the things that I really had to work on and move through. But those were really the elements of what kind of sent me down the bit of a rabbit hole into depression and burnout. But I kept going because we're taught to be strong and to do all the things, and there's no time or space to kind of step back. And how would we do that? And so for me, the option of not working, or taking a pause, or even acknowledging that there was something going on with me was not really an option. None of those things were options. So I eventually started to feel worse and worse, and I started to think, God, how is everyone doing this? It can't just be me. But I definitely felt like I was alone I was kind of treading water in an ocean. And at first I was swimming and treading and everything seemed fine, but eventually I started to get really tired, and I was like, wait, where is everybody? And it seems like people over there are swimming just fine. Like, how are they doing that? So I felt quite alone in my busyness and in my preoccupation with all the things. And that was something that I think eventually led to me finally just breaking down. So it wasn't just emotional and professional, as I mentioned earlier, it was also existential. So at this point, I had been to a doctor already in 2018, and she suggested antidepressants. She also suggested I get a puppy. At that point, I was completely overwhelmed with life, that both of those things seemed not for me. I definitely didn't want to take on a new project of a pet, and antidepressants for me were very taboo at the time. So I decided to go back to therapy, and I had been in therapy for a year when I had finally the breakdown, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And the idea of taking a break and taking a step back from work and taking a step back from all the responsibilities and all the obligations felt almost like I was being set free, or set free from jail. Like I just couldn't handle the weight anymore. So I was finally able to put that down. And I really knew that I was at that point because I was getting frustrated with everything. There was no joy in life. There was no joy in doing activities with my son. Everything seemed overwhelming. Anytime we'd have to drive somewhere, I was like, oh my God, have to drive there. And that was no fun. And with my colleagues at work, I think I hit it fairly well. But I definitely was frustrated. And every time there was a question, where do we keep this, or where is this logo? I was frustrated and I was annoyed, and I was short, and I had no ability to kind of collaborate anymore. And that's when I recognized, like, ooh, this does not feel good for me. I don't like this. I'm not this person. I don't want to be this person. So my doctor finally gave me a note eventually. So this was a year later, after the first suggestion of antidepressants. So this was a little over a year later. And I decided to take some time off. And I told my boss and my colleagues on the Friday that I was not coming back in on the Monday. I was in tears. This was a really big thing for me because I had essentially failed. And I wasn't able to do all the things, and I wasn't able to do them at the level that I thought I should be doing them at. So that was a really difficult moment for me. It was also liberating because finally I could say, oh, gosh, okay, I can just set this all down. I don't need to be all of this. So that was a really critical moment for me. And I eventually started to want to fix myself. So being the person that I am and the go-getter that I am, I decided, great, well, I'm off work. I'm going to just get into this and fix everything. To the point where my doctor actually had to tell me, Julia, chill, take a step back. This is not something you can just fix like that. You need to give yourself the time. You need to give yourself the patience. So inevitably, that's what I had to do. I did end up taking antidepressants. I took a very low dosage for about 6 weeks. That was good for me. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So rebuilding the foundation. So at that point, I had kind of hit rock bottom. I was not feeling good. I was not sleeping well. I really needed to feel, I wanted to feel differently. I wanted to get out of that. It wasn't fun to parent in that way. It wasn't fun to be myself in that way. So I had a routine, and I would bike up to the Mount Royal in Montreal. And the whole way up, inevitably, just the release of trying to bike and push, I would just be in tears, crying the whole way up. I'd finally make it up to the mountain, up to the top of the mountain, and there's a stable there. I am also a lover of horses, so I would just hang out with the horses. It's the police station stable, and I would just talk to them, pet them, be around them. Inevitably, after a bit of time, I would bike back down and I'd feel quite a bit better. I also am an avid rider, so I would try to spend as much time both in nature and around horses as I could. It really, really, really helped me. They're very intuitive animals. I also continued my therapy. I asked for help. I spoke to different types of therapists who helped me all in different ways. I tried to rest for somebody who's has an active mind and active body. That was a challenge for me. I also journaled. I have a meditation practice that I was able to rely on. And I really had to kind of slow down and say no to things. And if I really didn't feel, I really had to sit and learn how to reconnect to my body and feel what that felt like. So I did exercises like dancing and all kinds of different things where, visualization. How would I help myself if I were little Julia sitting in my hand? Like how would I talk to her and how would I treat her? And why am I being so hard on myself? So I think there were a lot of things that I really needed to explore and a lot of things that I needed to get to know about myself. Also recognizing what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. So does this activity or this thing bring me joy? Do I feel in my body that this is something that's going to be good, and am I happy doing this? Or am I actually happier saying, no thanks, it's not for me today? So I really had to explore those things, and those were new and scary and hard. But those are really the foundations of what was able to make me feel better. I also did some gardening. I got to spend some time in nature. I actually physically had my hands in dirt, which made a huge difference also. And just, taking a step back and not being in the kind of daily grind really I was able to get a lot of perspective from that. So as I slowly started to feel better, after 3.5 months, I did go back to work. Going back to work was a really great and wonderful experience. It's one of the most wonderful set of memories I have, seeing my colleagues again and really feeling so missed and loved and appreciated. By that time, I had also stopped taking antidepressants. For me, that was just the cycle that I was on. The side effects for me on the antidepressants were significant. It affected my biking, so my legs always felt like molasses. My breathing was not as easy as it was before. And I really felt like they gave me the perspective that I needed. But I also, as much as I wasn't feeling the downs, I also wasn't feeling the joys, and spending time with my son or my friends. Everything was a bit of a flat line. So by this point, by the time I had gone back to work, that part was done, and I did feel strong enough to kind of reconnect with that part of my life. And then I realized, oh, wait a second, I don't think I want to be in marketing anymore. And I knew that was kind of the feeling, and I had kind of put that aside to focus on myself. So when I went back to work, I was again faced with, right, okay, something's got to shift here. It just was no longer in line with the person that I had become and my values and where I really thought my strengths and talents and main contributions lay. So I decided to seek again professional help, and I sought I found in myself the courage to ask for that and to proceed with that. And I did a really interesting exercise actually when I was in the coaching session, which was around asking others to not just look at my own strength, for me to look at my own strengths, but for others to also reflect and tell me what they think my strengths are. And this was a really powerful and inspiring exercise because we often don't see ourselves in the same way that as others do. So it's a really simple exercise that I recommend if anybody wants to try that. I was also given this space, and I'm so grateful to the people at CloudOps for giving me the opportunity and the space to actually create a new role and propose a new role. So most of the roles there are technical. We work in cloud computing. So for me, it also felt like I was stuck because it's, well, in a non-technical role, like how many other options do I have? And it turns out there was another option, and they really allowed me the space to create that. I did go back to work progressively. So I did 2 days and then 3 days and then 4 days. And at 4 days, I realized this is my max. This is where I want to stay. I do not want to do more than this. I requested a special arrangement, and it was granted to me. And again, something that I'm eternally grateful for, because that day is invaluable to me. It is something that I every week makes a huge difference in my life, in my quality of life, in my parenting ability. So it's something that's really important. I am now in a new role in the people and culture team. So it's been a year, and that means that I also have to learn new things and adapt and allow myself to learn from others and be inspired by others. And that was something that it feels really good and refreshing. And I battle with imposter syndrome, but that's slowly becoming less and less of a factor. So it's been a really positive change for me. What helps me? So this is a list of different things that I did during my burnout to recover from my burnout, and also still to this day as a way to maintain my mental health. Mental health was not something I ever thought would affect me. I didn't have much experience with it. So when it did happen to me, it really took me by surprise. And I really was in denial about it for a very long time because I just thought it was normal that we all had to deal with all of these things and all these layers. So I definitely turned off social media. I deleted Facebook and Instagram. I turned off my notifications. So when I would turn on my phone, I wouldn't see a bunch of stuff popping up. That's something that I still have maintained. I also put money aside for hiring help. So sometimes I had to buy pre-made meals, or I have to buy pre-made meals. I also would have some help with cleaning. And that was something that I really judged myself very harshly on. And I finally just gave myself permission to do it because it really helped relieve anxiety around all the things that I was juggling in my life. Of course, maintaining a healthy and balanced routine and diet and lifestyle. I kept meditating. I spent time in nature and with my son and my friends. I also do things that make me happy. I understand more clearly now where my limits and boundaries are of what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And I started asking myself the question, well, what's the worst that can happen? And this was something that was really effective for me in thinking about, well, even if somebody thinks that I failed, well, then what? What's the worst that can happen after that? And that was something that was really powerful, and it gave me the ability to realize that it's not so bad after all, and there are ways of working through these layers, even though it doesn't always seem that way. Also, small victories, every little thing should be celebrated. So sometimes I'd vacuum, and I just would treat myself to a cup of tea, and I'd feel so accomplished that I had done that in one day. So if you are currently struggling in this, and that wouldn't be a surprise considering it's been a year of pandemic, it's been a year of screen fatigue. So I strongly encourage you to talk to someone, speak to friends or colleagues or even your boss or a therapist. You can also reach out to me. My contact info is on the slides. I'd be happy to listen. Please know that you're not alone. This is something that I think would have really helped me, of knowing this or knowing that somebody else had gone through something like this. Do what makes you happy. Life is sweet. Life is short. It's time to enjoy and try to focus on those. If you're in a managerial role and or otherwise, if you work in a team, ask people how they're doing. and ask from a genuine and authentic place, and also take on the responsibility to actively listen to the answer. So don't just ask out of courtesy, ask because you genuinely want to know, and it's not your problem to necessarily solve somebody else's issues, but listen to what they're saying and ask questions and be curious about their state. And also allow for flexibility. We are all different. We are all unique in our own ways. And so whatever kind of accommodations, if that's possible with your home life and your work, that's something, don't be afraid to ask, because it makes a huge difference if it can make a difference for you in your life and your level of stress or nervousness about what's going on in your life. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your presence and attention and your time. This is a very meaningful and touching topic for me. It hits very, very, very close to home. Again, it's something that I never thought would happen to me, and it's something that I'm very grateful for in the end. After all the hard times, it's made me the person that I am and the person that I want to be. So I really appreciate the opportunity again to speak about this, and I wish you all a wonderful day. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know. Thanks.